Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to rise today, realizing the gravity of this debate for millions of Canadians. For those who are new to our country, which at some point most of us were, or our ancestors were, Canada was a safe harbour with a reasonable guarantee to live out life free from harassment, harm, or extortion. It meant peaceful communities where front doors were often left unlocked and you had little to fear of having your car stolen while you slept. It meant you could enjoy Canada's vibrant city life knowing the streets were safe and stopping illegal drugs and firearms were a priority. It meant the most dangerous criminals were kept behind bars where they belong, not continually passing through a revolving door from our courts and back out into the streets. It meant that we had a federal government that protected your family from these harms through the strictest possible laws while ensuring they were enforced in our courts. But after 10 years of this Liberal government, the reality is much different. Terrible legislation like Bills C-5 and 75 demonstrate the consequences of reckless ideological Liberal policies are real. Since 2015, violent crime up 55%, firearms crime up 130%, extortion has exploded 330%, sexual assaults have risen 76%, and homicides are up 29%. In fact, a new report just released by the Macdonald-Laurier Institute analyzed crime data from 20 metropolitan areas representing nearly two-thirds of Canada's population. It found that Canada's violent crime rate has climbed steadily since the middle of last decade. It's been an era defined by lenient bail, soft on crime persecution, and police sources stretched way too thin. As stated in the report, quote, the latest evidence suggests that the problem is broader and more entrenched than many realize. Policymakers can no longer rely on temporary explanations or regional anomalies. The challenge now is to restore public confidence and measurable accountability in how we protect our cities. Speaker, what logical government would stand by the policies that have resulted in a prolonged nationwide crime wave? Sadly, obstruction and inaction have been the Liberal approach for the better part of a decade. However, bills like C-14 prove that determined and principled opposition can be effective in spurring change. This bill is a rare Liberal admission that their criminal justice reforms have failed. While it's a step in the right direction of the Conservative approach to bail and sentencing, it does not repeal the principle of restraint or restore mandatory minimum sentences. So what drove this government to finally introduce this Bill C-14? 2019's Bill C-75 codified the principle of restraint, requiring law enforcement and courts to release accused individuals at the earliest reasonable opportunity and under the least onerous conditions. This effectively created a catch-and-release system subjecting communities to dangerous offenders while they await trial. 2022's Bill C-5 went further, scrapping several mandatory minimum sentences and liberalizing the use of house arrest for serious offences, such as sexual assault. C-14, the bill we're debating today, makes a start, just a start, at addressing the serious implications of C-75 and C-5. It clarifies that the principle of restraint does not require an offender's outright release. It also directs court to take into account numbers and gravities of charges facing the accused when determining bail. With C-14, there's an incentive for those who have abused our justice system, those who have grown accustomed to getting away with multiple serious crimes with little or no repercussions to think twice. There are other encouraging elements of the bill, such as requiring consecutive sentences for repeat auto theft, breaking and entering, extortion, and arson offences. The purpose of sentencing has been refocused on the protection of the Canadian public, at least to some degree, rather than solely rehabilitation of the offender. When sentencing, a judge must consider a new aggravating factor involving repeat violent behaviour over the last 5 years. It also partially reverses C-5's expansion of house arrest eligibility. Yes, Speaker, there are many beams of light in this bill that attempt to break through the stormy skies of the last 6 years of a soft on crime agenda. However, it comes up short. The fact is that dangerous elements of the Liberal ideology on crime and punishment remain. C-14 is not an outright repeal of the principle of restraint, and it does not restore mandatory minimums. It's truly a missed opportunity to toughen up penalties for serious violent offences. And while consecutive sentences and aggravating factors are useful, they are still left to judicial discretion in applying them. Why does it matter that we get this bill right? All major urban centres have seen an increase in violent crime, but so have our smaller cities and rural communities across Manitoba and Alberta and my home province of Saskatchewan. There simply isn't any more time to waste. Canadians no longer feel safe in their communities. Every day that passes without a return to a common-sense approach to crime puts more innocent Canadians at risk. A Post-Media Leger poll shows growing concern among Canadians about personal safety and the effectiveness of their justice system. 51% say they worry about safety in their neighbourhoods, including the risk of a home invasion. Concern is highest among young people ages of 35 to 54, a group that is most likely to have families and own homes. A striking 87% of Canadians believe they have the right to use reasonable force against an intruder, a number that climbs to 92% in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and among those 55 years and older. Leger Executive Vice President Andrew Enns notes this sentiment is long-standing but significant, warning that widespread distrust in the justice system can erode respect for the law. Certainly, criminals do not respect or fear these laws, while innocent Canadians are living in fear and facing consequences. Overall, 54% believe the justice system works against law-abiding citizens, while only 29% think it protects Canadians. That is a sad and regrettable reflection on the ability of this Liberal government to inspire confidence in their system of justice, but it is well deserved. They have consistently ignored police, municipalities, business owners, and above all, law-abiding Canadians by standing by policies that fail to keep us safe. Note I said they consistently ignore. Note that, not that they failed to see or grasp that increased breadth of violent crime erupting across Canada over the last decade of their Liberal rule. Unfortunately for residents of the James Smith Cree Nation in my home province, this reality is beyond real. On September 4th, 2022, a mass stabbing spree unfolded across 13 locations in the Cree Nation and the nearby village of Weldon. Miles Sanderson killed 11 people and wounded 17. He had 59 previous criminal convictions, including an assault with a weapon, robbery, and threats. He had been granted statutory release in August 21 after serving a sentence, but by May 2022 he was unlawfully at large after failing to keep in touch with his parole officer. In the wake of this tragedy, many questions surrounded the decisions of the court, Parole Board, and Corrections Canada. What rationale validates repeatedly releasing this violent criminal from custody despite his dozens of convictions? Another tragedy unfolded this past September at the Hollow Waters First Nation, where 26-year-old Tyron Simard, known to police and our courts, went on a horrifying rampage. He stabbed 8 people across 2 homes in Hollow Water, killing his own 18-year-old sister, Marina, and injuring 7 others. Why was he out on bail? 3 months earlier, he'd been charged with assault with a weapon and mischief. A Winnipeg court released him just 4 days later with these conditions: a curfew, no alcohol or drugs, no weapons, and heartbreakingly, no contact with his sister. He violated every one of those conditions. He returned to Marina's home and took her life. The law did not adequately protect Marina, the people of Hollow Water First Nation, James Smith Cree Nation, and the village of Weldon. The Liberal system designed for restraint and lighter sentences has not served public safety. This government needs to remove C-5 and C-75 and strengthen C-14 to repair the damage in memory of those who have lost their lives and to those left behind with horrific memories. Colleagues, this House must replace restraint with a public safety primacy clause. Ensuring public and community safety are the governing principles of courts across our lands. We must restore mandatory minimum sentences for firearms, sexual, repeat violent offences, and drug offences. Conditional sentences eligibility must exclude robbery, firearms, trafficking, and chronic offenders. It's not too late for this government to adopt the full Conservative plan to stop their decade of turning a blind eye to the rampant chaos, crime, and disorder that C-75 and C-5 have encouraged. C-14 is what must be the beginning of a full restoration of this country's promise of safety and prosperity for Canadians wherever they live. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've indicated, whether it's provinces, municipalities, different stakeholders, law enforcement officers, they understand and they want to see Bill C-14 move forward. Canadians want bail reform legislation. The Conservatives, otherwise, are being motivated by another factor. You have the leader of the Conservative Party who said the extreme bloodshed and violence. You have the MP for Oxford. We're now living in a war zone in Canada. They're using these radical statements in order to generate funds, Mr. Speaker. They're raising of funds in their own political interests ahead of Canadian interests. My question to the member opposite is, will she not recognize that it's about time that the Conservative Party start focusing more on Canadians as opposed to their own leadership and the Conservative Party of Canada and allow this legislation to pass before the end of the year? Will she support that?
Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do thank the member for the question. There's a tiny bit of truth in some words in there. The Canadians are desperate to have this government do the right thing. And this bill has some good in it, but it is not responding to those very people that he is saying are calling on this government to do the right thing, which is bring forward, shut down the legislation in C5 and C-75. That is what they want. They want an outright repeal of the principle of restraint, and they want restoration of mandatory minimums.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Regina Louvain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And what I just heard from the member from Winnipeg North is laughable. There's not a more partisan politician in this chamber. He would do anything for the Liberal Party of Canada. That includes absolutely ensuring that everything looks good from their point of view. The only reason we need bail reform is because this member and the rest of the Liberals passed terrible legislation for the last 10 years, making our streets unsafe. It is unconscionable for him to stand there and say, we need to reform, when they were the ones that messed up the justice system in the first place. A Supreme Court ruling that allowed people that had child abuse pictures and videos get a 1-year sentence is unconscionable. And any member of Parliament that doesn't think that is not right shouldn't be here.
Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Well, I concur with the member and all the things that he just said, and I would love it if this individual who seems to want to convince Canadians that they are on the right track when they have been in this House hearing this side of the floor over and over and over talk about the issues with C5 and C-75 that has caused the rampant high levels of crime across our nation. People in Canada are calling on this government to do the right thing, not to just do a little bit of something, rather than remove all of the things that are causing the greatest angst in this country that I have seen in the 10 years that I've been here.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the member avoided answering the question, and the question was very straightforward. There is an expectation that Canadians have that they will see bail reform legislation. The only reason why we will not see bail reform legislation is because the Conservative Party is more focused on their own personal fundraising and their own political interests. That is the only reason Canadians will not be able to see bail reform legislation. Does she not see that in reflecting on her constituents that the Conservatives need to reverse their policy?
Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
I represent Saskatchewan. I think the member knows how absolutely ridiculous that last statement was. There is no question across this country that what the people of Canada want is for this government to finally step up and do the right thing. If the member can assure me that they will include amendments that remove C5 and C-45 or 75 from legislation, I will gladly support their bill. They are not representing Canadians. They are not supporting Canadians. They are not answering the call of Canadians for protection and lowered crime in this country that they basically caused the impetus for with C5 and C-75.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Barrie Springwater Ormondante, a short one.
Thank you, Speaker. Just quickly, I've been here this morning for a couple hours and I've heard the members opposite from the Liberal government talking about bail reform. Maybe the member on our side, the Conservative side, could mention she's been here for over 10 years. Who's been in power for the last 2 years, and what do the words bail reform mean, and why are we sitting here talking about bail reform after who's been in charge for 10 years?
The honourable member for Yorkton Melville in 20 seconds or less.
Well, 20 seconds to say, that's easy. The reason we're talking about bail reform is because these people did a terrible job of bringing in legislation that has caused incredible angst across this country and increased crime that is unconscionable. Thank you.